So I started digging deeper into like what does Berachain currently do, like what are the limitations, what are validators missing to like really sort of work with this system, and that's how we came up with BeeBribes. Like it's the result of what would we want as a validator. How can we optimize the staking rewards for our users by still actively participating in the ecosystem?
GM. This is the first time I'm doing an interview with a fellow validator. We're gonna talk all about the Cosmos ecosystem, validator experience, and most importantly, Lavender.Five dedicated Berachain app Bee Bribes. This is BlockHunters Voices, the podcast with cool kids from the blockchain space. I'm Joachim Vuju, your host. Welcome, Ertemann. How are you, brother?
all good. Thanks for the introduction. It's a good cold morning here, so I'm excited.
Let's go. Before diving into the tech, can you share your crypto origin story? What first sparked your interest and what were you working on before stepping into the space?
Yeah. So I used to be in physics, data science, that kind of stuff. I did my master's there, and during doing that here in the Netherlands, I sort of accidentally dabbled into crypto. Some friends of mine said I think it's the end of 2020 that they said like, hey, you should buy some Cardano. I like made $500 in an hour. I accidentally bought some, got really deep into like this YouTube influencer dark hole where you don't get out of, lost a bit of money, and then somewhere like March 2021, I think, I found this network in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is called Secret Network. There used to be this podcast. It's crypto over coffee or something. Yeah, I don't think he does it anymore. Anyway, found it there, made like a specific Binance account to be able to buy it, bought it, and then it 10x'd within like a month of me buying it. I think I made maybe $800, but it sort of changed my perspective on this whole thing. Like, what can you do with it? Back then they just launched a DeFi app, so I basically migrated all my assets on chain and started using this DeFi app and like really started exploring what was happening. And back then on Secret Network there used to be this support committee, which is basically was for people helping everybody that was using the DeFi apps to actually find back their assets, because it's a privacy chain. So if you make a transaction and you don't actually understand what you've done, then your assets went somewhere, but you have no clue where it went because you can't see it on chain. So there used to be this support committee that helped people like find out what the heck they did with their assets and where they went. And back then, like Secret had some, I don't know, there were some things on the DeFi side that were like really crazy. So I started helping out, and actually that committee was led by, or two people of the committee were Schultze and James. And Schultze and James are now my two colleagues at Lavender.Five. So I met them there. I stayed around at Secret. I started doing a developer relations job. I've been there for more than 2 years. And in the meantime, Lavender.Five started. I did a little bit of work for them in the first few months or like of that, but they really started growing in 2022. So that's when I got on board at part-time, and then I joined full-time late last year. So I've been with Lavender.Five for 2.5 years now. We're full-time for almost 1.5, or like, yeah. So about that.
I didn't know the origin is from Secret Network. That's very interesting.
Yeah, Lavender.Five was the first, or Secret was the first validator for Dylan, for Schultze, the founder of Lavender.Five. And then it grew from there. So James onboarded from there as well. They both stepped out of the support committee. I stuck around at Secret for a lot longer, trying to like do a lot of things in the ecosystem. And then, yeah, ultimately went to Lavender.Five as well. And now we do a lot more chains. Now we do 60 and not just one.
But what made you start validating, and how was your strategy evolved since those early days from the Secret Network? Because right now you have like 10,000 delegators, 500 million TVL, so you've gone a long way.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I think when we started out, it was just like a tech thing. I think Dylan just enjoyed doing it and like wanted to use some of his knowledge. He's a backend engineer, so he's very familiar with like I guess peering setups and like how do you connect with people and like how do you get performance out of machines, and then so that's how the secret validator started, and it was just secret for quite a while, and then there was this glow up in Cosmos where everybody started launching chains. Like you just needed a few commands on the command line to launch one, and you'd instantly make $100-500 million or something by doing it. So everybody started launching chains, and then we hopped onto Osmosis that just came out, and that started IBC and like the DEX space, Juno, Impact Hub, Chihuahua, like all of these sort of smaller Cosmos chains. We hopped on board, or they hopped on board. Let's put it like that, because I joined later. Yeah, and then at a certain point, we enrolled in the Aptos private testnet to like get our knowledge onto another ecosystem. And I'd say that was really like the moment in time where it like shifted from sort of being just a hobby to like being a full profession. James and Schultz were on the clock 24/7. Aptos testnet was like quite harsh on operators in the sense that like it was really extensive hardware, and you had to wake up in the middle of the night to fix your testnet because performance was very important. Yeah, and they ended up landing a Genesis slot, working a lot with the team, writing documentation, doing all kinds of things to help them out. And that journey sort of, whenever Aptos launched since then, we've sort of only grown from testnet. So Aptos was already live when I joined in 2022. Midway, yeah, it just went live, I think, and then I think we did 25 or 30 networks by that point, mainly Cosmos and then Aptos. So we've added like roughly 35 networks in another 2 years.
Yeah, Aptos was really a game changer for validators. And also Sui. I don't know. Are you guys on Sui?
We're not in Sui. No. Yeah, we're not. But indeed, those two really. It was a big professionalization step for people that entered in the 2021 cycle. Like, there's a lot of validator companies that people might know that are from the 2017, 2018 era. You can think of like P2P and Chorus One and Figment. They all started back when Ethereum launched, or like Ethereum staking went up, and like Polkadot staking came about and stuff like that, and Polygon and so forth. And everybody that sort of missed that, like tried to sort of make it in Cosmos, and then they had to find their next like outside of Cosmos network. And for most of them, that was like indeed Sui or Aptos sort of was like the professionalization step, I guess, they needed to really become like a serious business.
And what are some of the most important lessons you've learned so far in your validator experience until
now? Good question. I don't know. I think maybe the best answer is like everything is marketing. And I think some people call this community or distribution, but it's all roughly the same thing. Whereas like you're only worth as much as the value you can bring, or as how much value people put to your brand. And your brand is many different things. It's everything from how technically feasible you are yourself, and how people chat with others, and what other validators recommend you, but also how you look on Twitter, what you do for external services and whatever. Validation is very commoditized business in a way, where although there's a lot of niche things people can help with, like in the end, we're all roughly doing the same thing. So you really have to focus on how do people see you. So although you might be a technical firm, marketing or like brand building is maybe more important than anything else. And that comes in many factors.
In my opinion, community, marketing, BD is the same thing under a different hat by the end of the day.
Yeah, it's just how people see you, right? Which is very important.
I wanted to see exactly how you see the recent changes from the Cosmos from the Cosmos ecosystem, because Recently, Interchain acquired Script Protocol, and it will be ICF's main subsidiary, basically leading Cosmos product, vision, and go-to-market. What's your vision for how Script Protocol will shape the future of Cosmos?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I learned about this news, I think, in the past few weeks. There's been some rumbles here and there that like something like this might happen. I think people have been joking about Skip taking over the wheel for a long time, and not for the right reasons. I think, right? Like they're a very product-focused team. They see issues, fix them, wrap them around something that's usable, and ship that to many different people at the same time. And they've done this consistently, I think, especially in the past 2 years. Before that, they were really focused on like MEV, building that, which although was very cool. I think we were one of the first users for the MEV client on like Juno, where it first launched. It just didn't bring any money, so they had to change around to like other factors and other things. But if you look at what happened like last year, where like they worked very hard with DYDX to bring them to market and add this Oracle, which is now utilized in Neutron, it's utilized in Initia, it's utilized in DYDX and so forth. The Slinky sidecar, the IBC.fun, like this sort of bridge or like interface for people to use IBC has changed the entire ecosystem. Like it's no longer hard for me to, like, we get a lot of user questions and it's no longer hard for me to answer them. I just send them towards this link and I say, good luck, go use it. And you can bridge in from any other chain to any other chain. People don't have any issues where they accidentally IBC the wrong asset and we have to like flush them on the relayer side or whatever. It just works. I don't know, there are many examples of this. And they've onboarded the right people as well. Like I think Bora from Kepler went to IBC to Skip. I saw Jeremy, who just a chain registry and worked with Osmosis for a long time, went to Skip. Like there's a lot of very knowledgeable people that joined their ecosystem. So it's in my opinion the right company to think of what the Cosmos ecosystem needs and sort of ship that as like very wrapped products that hopefully integrate quickly with other things. And one of the things that was always missing in Cosmos is this. It's basically trying to push these chains further. Like, it's not that the ICF or binary builders or whatever wasn't accessible to like get help. But if I'm a network and I'm like 3 versions behind, there's nobody that's kicking me in the butt and saying, hey, can you please upgrade and like make the ecosystem feel more smooth? Because that's one of the issues in Cosmos. Like at a certain point, everybody's so far behind because they're all relatively small teams that don't necessarily have the skills to upgrade these networks and so forth, that like the entire ecosystem starts feeling more fragmented. Like if you just stay within like Neutron, Osmosis, Noble, then you'll have a good time because they're all on like the newest versions. They'll have everything figured out. They have good standards. But as soon as you like sort of go outside of that small ecosystem, everything sort of goes to hell. I think Skip is one of the teams that can fix that as well by having these modules they made. Yeah, by having, well, yeah, not even alignment, but also they made a lot of very cool features, but they were always outside of the SDK. As in they were not, it's not like you add a line and say include this module and it works. You have to sort of add it and it's not officially part of the SDK, so people might be hesitant about that. I think as soon as they lead like the go-to-market and the product side, they will integrate a lot more of these sort of novel modules and things that are really smooth and like improve the ecosystem all into the same thing, and then push people to actually upgrade. Like push everybody to actually include all of these things, and then the entire ecosystem should start feeling better. And they interface on all layers, right? They have users use their clients, the whatever, like the front ends. They've built chain modules. Like they really understand the entire stack. So yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be too optimistic, but working with them in the past has been a pleasure, and I think
it's a step forward.
It's a step forward because it's a team. It's a team and a company that will hopefully make a lot of use from little resources, instead of, in my opinion, the ICF and Informal and some other combinations where a lot of money sort of goes to waste to like external things that, although they are important, it's not like pushing growth, right? We should maybe if you compare it to like Solana, maybe we should be a little bit more, or like what Haseeb, I think, from Dragonfly always says on this like podcast on Unchained. He always says Solana is like the US, where everybody's just sort of pushing for like infinite growth, and like everybody should thrive by just going to market faster. And Ethereum is a bit like Europe, where people sort of are happy with like having social welfare and like some other things, but they're not necessarily pushing the envelope as much. Well, Cosmos should sort of join Solana maybe a little bit and like go harder on like actually pushing new features and like trying to survive, instead of saying, oh hey, we built this great tech, come and use it, but like we don't really care.
Yeah, you have to work for your bags, the DJ style.
Yes, exactly. So I think they'll work for our backs. What it does to Cosmos Hub or Atom is still to be seen. I don't know what the final roadmap will look like. It remains hard to put value onto a $2 billion asset that doesn't have smart contracts or like much fee generation, but maybe they'll find a very interesting thing. But at least I'm excited for IBC Eureka and some of the other items they're pushing, which are going to be interesting.
You and me both know that the validator business, the staking business, is very competitive, so it's not enough to just, I'm gonna spin up a node, but rather you should have financial contributions, community contributions, and technical contributions, and especially for all the new chains like Berachain is nowadays. So you guys pushed in that direction and launched BeeBribes, which basically introduce a permissionless bribery market for BGT incentives. And I want to know, what was the inspiration behind creating this solution, and how does it align with Berachain's POL model?
Yeah, so on the product side, like there's more ideas maybe in the future, but like this is something I sort of lead at Lavender.Five, and how we think about it is we don't just want to build a product on a chain because we like the chain. Like I have certain ideas and they need to really be, in my opinion, solid to also actually find sort of, I don't know, I've gone through maybe 5 or 10 DApp ideas before I finally landed on this one for Berachain. Like there's been moments in the past where we said maybe we should develop this for this chain or that for that chain, but this was the first one where I was like, yes, this makes a lot of sense. I think this is product aligned, we can do this. What BeeBribes does and how we came to it is that maybe a little bit of history. Like I initially wrote the title BeeBribes comes from a private voting app, which I thought of maybe a year ago, which was going to use like IBC and Secret and some other chains to make private votes and then sort of sell these votes to other people. Because what's the main interesting thing about Cosmos? It's this whole voting aspect where you have governance and people really like governance, even though it's drama and it's like stupid to an extent. People really like it. So like, what if you could sell your voting power to other people and do that privately? That was the original idea of BeeBribes. I had a whole design. And then when we started digging into Berachain for our own sake, like trying to figure out, okay, how do we work with other applications, like send out our incentives, and like all of these conversations came up in the past year. Sort of this idea came back to me, which is like, maybe we should just sell our vote on these incentives. So I started digging deeper into like, what does Berachain currently do? Like, what are the limitations? What are validators missing to like really sort of work with this system? And that's how we came up with BeeBribes. Like it's the result of what would we want as a validator? How can we optimize the staking rewards for our users by still actively participating in the ecosystem? So not just saying, hey, someone pay us, or hey, we'll just use whatever is being paid much on the chain, but actually actively participate and like have users have a say in how that's going. And at the same time, sort of, I guess, automate or like simplify the workflow for the validator itself, because there's a lot of validators on Berachain. and there's only so many of them which really understand the ecosystem and have the connections with the right applications. Like there's at least 50 like very solid applications, but there's probably hundreds of applications on Berachain. So for you to interface with all of them and have to like make deals on how much does your BGT cost, and like how much money do I give, and like how do I then send this to stakers, becomes very, very complicated. So that's what we want to solve, and grab a market share of that perspective. So how you should really view Bee Bribes, maybe in a single sentence, is it's a combination of, it's how infrared works, infrared finance, and their sort of bribery model for their own like LSD, but then natively on chain.
And why exactly did you choose Berachain for this? Is it because of the POL model?
I'd say it's not like we chose Berachain. It's more so the app. Yeah, like it's only feasible on Berachain. Like that's the only reason we built it. Like if Berachain didn't exist, we wouldn't have built this app, and maybe we would have never done anything with governance bribery or vote bribery or whatever. It is sort of interfacing with the testnet and having many of these conversations with apps brought up this like sort of discrepancy in this IDE, and that's why we started building it.
Basically, Berachain chose you, not the other way around.
Yeah, sort of, I guess. Yeah, I mean, like it's one of the first things where I thought of where we had a product ID that was also like a very clear gap, in my opinion, and that's just because of how it's designed and how it integrates and how many moving factors they are, and because they give validators a lot of power to work with the ecosystem and like integrate with it, and then so that's why.
Dynamic pricing and multi-token bribes are a standout feature for Bee Bribes. What motivated these design choices, and what technical or strategic challenges did you face in implementing them?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a very short overview of what Bee Bribes is, and then I can dive into why these things are important. So Bee Bribes is a native way for validators, applications, and users to interface on selling BGT incentives. So the one-liner is, it's a permissionless market for BGT incentives, permissionless bribery market. So what it does is a validator, instead of stating where they will distribute their BGT incentives, so to which vaults, like I'm sending it to Kodiak this or Bax that, they basically give this power to the application. So BlockHunters can say, Bee Bribes will steer our incentive board, and then there's an auction every day where people can bid in any supported token, really, on where you should send your incentives. So I can bid $1,000 on sending it to the Honey Burps pool, and someone else can bid 500 to send it to Kodiak Paw Honey, and another person can send 500 to send it to Yeet Wrapped Bera on Bex. And then that total at the end of the epoch, so at the end of the day, is then compared against their sort of USD weighted pricing. So let's say you can use any token, right? So you could have used Paw, or you could have used Bera, or you could have used Honey, whatever. So it's compared against like the sort of US dollar equivalent, and then the percentages are sent out. So in this case, your board of the validator would look 50% of your total BGT incentives goes to Honey, 25% goes to Yeet Web Bera, and 25% goes to Paw Honey, I think I said. And in that design, that basically means that every day your BGT incentives on chain are worth X, dependent on how many people bid on the market. And this is this natively works. Basically, it's a smart contract that creates this auction, and then the validator has this operator function, which is already included in how currently Berachain works. So there's no like added sort of trust assumptions or whatever. You just give the rights to the app, and the app will do it for you. And then all of the rewards that are created from bribing go to stakers. And in theory, it goes 100% to stakers. That's at least the design for now, because I don't see any reason as to why the validator should take a cut on these bribery commissions. And then the stakers get these rewards, and hopefully they earn a high APR. So why? And then your question was, what are the standout features? I think one is indeed this dynamic pricing. And this is maybe something validators understand best. But every time we have a conversation with an app, they might be like, hey, we want to send you, I don't know, 1 million tokens to emit incentives to us for the first 2 months of Berachain launch. And then multiple questions come up. One is like, I have no clue how many incentives I'll have because I don't know how much stake I'll have. And then 2 is, I have no clue how much a BGT should be worth because the chain is not live. And maybe people will value BGT incentives really highly and maybe they won't. And it's very hard for me to figure out at this point in time. So what BeeBribes basically does is, now when you have this conversation, you can just simply say to the app, every day you can commit X amount of funds to our auction pool and you'll automatically get our incentives if you bid enough. And that means that if on a Sunday afternoon nobody is farming Berachain and for some reason BGT is not in high demand, you might be able to scoop up BGT incentives really cheap at another moment in time. I don't know, on a Monday evening, and everybody wants a lot of BGT incentives because there is some type of launch or whatever, then maybe they're really expensive. And this goes up and down dependent on the actual, what the market wants. And then additionally, people can do this in any token. So natively on Berachain, how it would work is if you incentivize a vault, you choose a rate. So you say, I want to emit X tokens for every 1 BGT I get. If you do this, you deposit the total budget, but how fast the budget is emptied is dependent on how many validators actually send their incentives. So you never have direct impact. You hope that you get many incentives, but it could also be that no validator ever switches, right? And then you try to get incentives, but you don't get any. On BeeBribes, you always have instant gratification, or whatever you want to call it. As soon as you deposit money to get bribes, you instantly get them after the epoch closes. And you can do this in every token, so you're not emitting a rate. You're always self-selecting whether you want that pricing or not. And then you can spend some meme coin on getting incentives go to a specific app. You're not bound to use any of the whitelisted tokens.
And in the beginning, BeeBribes will work exclusively only with Lavender.Five validator, but are you planning to expand with other validators as well?
Yeah, I really want to enable it for all validators. It's just, I have to understand on whether people will really like this or not, and whether it will work. There is some assumptions on why we think BeeBribes is significant. And one of those assumptions is basically that that our APR needs to be higher than people just using the native system, right? So it needs to be better for bribers and it needs to be better for stakers. If it's not better for both, then the application doesn't make a lot of sense because people will just default to the basic assumptions. There's no extra risk for stakers, so that's at least a benefit, right? You don't have to do anything, they just stake and that's it. Like, they just stake natively with our validator, they don't have to interface with any contracts. But there is the assumption that the vaults on Berachain itself will be pricey and have a low APR, basically. Because we expect that most validators will opt in to
the same pools.
Yeah, they will all opt into roughly the same pool, so that over time, the APR on all of those pools is exactly the same.
Yeah.
It flattens out, which is sort of the efficient market hypothesis. There is a few cases where people might send incentives to specifically just one vault or whatever. But overall, yeah, that's sort of the expectation I have from talking to many validators. And also because I know there's a lot of more institutional ones that want to emit only US dollars to their stakers. So they might optimize for how
honey.
much they can sell it for, and that they can, or they might even actually optimize for honey and so forth. In our system, we don't sell any of the rewards. All the rewards go to stakers. So that also means that if you deposit your token, there's no like net sell demand, because it's not like validators are selling them to then emit US dollars to their stakers. No, it just goes directly to stakers. So you're also sort of growing your distribution to an extent. Anyway, so it's reliant on this market hypothesis that it's efficient, because that means that even if people bribe the Lavender.Five or any other validator on BeeBribes, whenever we actually emit those incentives, we get both the chain APR, which is this flat that's roughly the same on every pool, and you get the bribe APR. So yeah, you basically duplicate, you add additional value. Let's say this market efficient market hypothesis doesn't completely play out. I just don't know. Like at this point, it's very hard to assume. We're on testnet. All the money is sort of fake, so like it's hard to figure out. But I have a feeling that it will be good, and that people that register to stake with us will have a high APR. That also comes because there are specific parties that we know will stake but will not receive bribe rewards, so they will not opt in to receive rewards from BeeBribes. These might be LSDs, these might be large funds that just want the on-chain native APR. So that means that the bribes are being distributed amongst a smaller subset of users, and that means the APR for them will be higher. So I expect it to be a positive outcome, but I don't really know. So for now, the design is in such a way that the validator themselves has to deploy the contract, and because of that, it doesn't necessarily, we could also deploy it for you, for example, but it would be a separate instance, and that's not necessarily optimal from a smart contract design to like have it be really scalable. So the first version is just, it will work on this instance, and it will work for our validator, or it could in theory work for any other validator we would deploy the entire instance for. But if it's successful, and I think there is a few months in the initial Berachain launch where there might not be too many external vaults, so like people can sort of really try and test it out.
Yeah,
so
because
like
in the beginning they only said only the foundation pools are gonna be whitelisted for some months, so we have time to readjust and try everything after the mainnet launches. So
that's the goal indeed, and then that also means that we can sort of, security wise, it's better for us because it makes it so the smart contract really only has a few reliances, so that for stakers and for bribers it's really safe, even though it's not completely audited. If we would go to a version where other validators can also use it and can use it permissionlessly, because that would be the next setup, we would deploy a V2 probably 3 months after mainnet launch or so. If it's successful, like we'll test it in the first month. If it's successful, we can develop it within 1 to 2 months, I think. Then the V2 will be a factory contract, so any validator can engage, set up their own pool, set up their own system. And the nice thing already about BeeBribes is that validators can determine how much of their total cutting board is determined by the app. So you could also set it up in such a way where for 50% you want to use it yourself, you have some deals with some apps, and the other 50% is determined by BeeBribes. So you can combine this, and I think there will be it's a bit dependent. If we, for now, the validators in the chain doesn't know yet how the native incentives will be distributed to stakers. It's, as far as I know, it's sort of unknown on whether that will be done on a chain level or whether the validators themselves have to send out the rewards. If it's the latter, then I think BeeBribes will get a lot of users, because validators don't necessarily have the tooling and automation to like send out these rewards. So having an easy contract where people can opt in and like it automatically gets distributed is sort of a real high value. And that's something we could contribute without charging necessarily too much of a fee. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, it goes live hopefully later today, which I don't know when you put this podcast live, but it might already be out. So the initial version might already be usable by this point. We're having some final backend problems to fix before we can put it out, but then people can actually start using it. It's live on the smart contract's been live on the testnet for like 3-4 weeks already with our internal systems. It's just I want the final interface for people to work with needs to be pretty.
Beyond BeeBribes, what additional tools or products do you think the Berachain ecosystem needs? Are there any other emerging opportunities that excite you?
I think largely the thing with chains in general is that, and you know this very well, that if they have a lot of validators, a lot of things are already figured out. If they have few validators, there are still a lot of things that remain. I think for Berachain, a lot of the tooling has been built out, as in we and others have developed like Ansibles to use for node operators. There's like all kinds of monitoring tooling that does both the beacon and the execution client. People have built like dashboards where you can easily create and like set up your cutting board for validators. There is like this BGT scan, I think it's called, where you have like all these analytics that show up. There's a lot of RPC endpoints, there's snapshots, like most of the infrastructure I think is there. It's now, I think what will remain interesting is really efficiency around proof of liquidity. I think all of this is not really built out, and the same accounts for BeeBribes, because we don't really know what it will look like on mainnet. But I think as soon as mainnet goes live in the first few months pass, there will be a lot of staker optimization and like optimizations on all sorts of things, just so that people can get a high APR, because it's not like a base proof of stake Tendermint-esque consensus where you just delegate, you get exactly the same APR as someone else. The differentiation between validators and between how you stake is very high. So I can only assume that there will be all kinds of endpoints, and this is an idea I thought of as well, as like create an endpoint for like what is the sort of expected price of BGT, because of course BGT is worth 1 Bera, but hopefully BGT has some form of premium, right? Because it allows you to direct incentives and do other things, so it should have some form of premium. But not all LSDs are redeemable. So if they're not redeemable, then how does a premium work, right? Like, so there's all kinds of, I don't know. I'm interested to learn what the official BGT price will be and how people will then sort of start creating a more efficient market for where they send their incentives, for who they stake with, for what apps they want to interact with, and so forth. And that tooling is still missing, but that tooling also really can only be created, I think, when mainnet goes live. So that's pending. Pending for now. Yeah.
As someone that is deeply involved in the blockchain ecosystems, what keeps you excited about this space? I mean, are there like any trends or technologies outside validating that you're particularly passionate about?
Myself, I'm a bit of a DeFi. I wouldn't say degen. Maybe I'm not that high on the scale, but I really like operating in DeFi. So there are the most things that I'm sort of interested or excited about. So you can think of like power perpetuals and things like, you are familiar with Blackwing as well, right? What they're doing with like infinity pools. There's multiple teams working on this, but things like Ethena and Spendle and like the growth of that ecosystem, I really enjoy what like P-Pots is doing, for example. It's like a volatility farming protocol. Like there's a lot of interesting advancements, I think. There's also this whole meme sort of sub-segment where people are creating like the next, I don't know if you remember Ohm, but they're like we're creating like sort of Ohm-like forks, but with a meme coin aspect. Like, I don't know, this sort of degenerate on the DeFi side I still really enjoy.
I came out of Ohm, right? So
yeah, to an extent, yeah. So there's a lot of, I mean, the Bera crew is like filled to the brim with these people, which is why they have so many interesting DeFi and other apps, right? Like when I first met them, they just got on like some of the head of Augur, like some of the Curve team, and like they're all DeFi OGs to an extent. So Yeah, anyway, like that's still really, I guess that's the most interesting part for me in crypto. It's like this sort of financial, I don't know, engineering, I guess, or like these sort of very complicated DeFi projects. And then I'm very hyped for interoperability. So like on the infrastructure side, I really enjoy collaborating and working with teams that try to solve these issues. So I'm a big fan of MinutSwap, which is this whole sort of pricing the delay of the optimistic bridging in the initial ecosystem. I think it's a super interesting and genuine idea that makes a lot of sense. I'm excited about Union and like interoperability in the CK aspect. Like how do you simplify that? So yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm still very excited about, but
What's
that's about it.
What's kind of your take that we've been like in a meme super cycle from, let's say, March 2023 when PayPal launched, and you've seen like the altcoins, especially infrastructure coins, that are not really doing well, and people are just hopping into pump.fun, all the Solana coins, and the whole Murat theory that we are in a meme super cycle and stuff like that.
Yeah, everybody should buy what is it, SPX 69, right? Yeah, no, I think truthfully, like the easiest way to answer it for me is just that everything is getting correctly repriced. Like if you look at the history, just in general, infra projects in crypto have always been insanely overhyped or like insanely overpriced because of all kinds of factors, right? And a lot of this sort of speculative premium is now just going to other things. It's going to meme coins, it's going away. And we've already seen this with DeFi, right? Like the speculative premium on DeFi has been gone for a very long time. Like the past 2 years, most DeFi projects traded at like 20 to 40 price to revenue, price to earnings, dependent on what you view as earnings and what you view as revenue, but whatever. So the speculative premium was sort of already taken away from DeFi, like it was already being more properly priced. And I think we're seeing a very similar thing with infrastructure projects where you just can't really get away anymore with like doing an insane launch unless like the fundamentals are already sort of in place. And I'm not saying speculative premium is gone, like people gonna punt whatever infra coin they like anyway, and it makes it harder as well for validators, right? Like I'm personally really excited about projects choosing more sustainable economics, like not having investor stake and so forth. But it's hard for validators because it degrades the total assets that you have under management. And like, for example, for us, like we're doing, I think right now, maybe 450 million in TVL. It's a bit dependent on like the pricing. And that sounds like an insane amount of money. But if you check what like actually results from that in like earnings, it's not that crazy, you know. And like we have nothing to complain about, I never will. But if you see that multiple of like what people launch at and how much value is actually being staked go down and down and down over time, then the market gets only more competitive. And I think this has been going on for already more than a year or maybe 2 years, where the staking market to an extent is shrinking and not growing. Yes, there's more chains, but the total value to be staked and like how that is operating it's sort of in this lull, I'd say. I guess like it's semi-flat until you get like the Solana revive again, where like chains start making MEV and suddenly a lot of the value is from that perspective, and then again like there is more APR to be had. So
yeah, and also it's
yeah.
not enough to just spin up that validator node, right? You have to have all those things that you talk about, you know, community involvement, education, technical contributions, public nodes, all sorts of things, dApps, building dApps, contributing to the ecosystem. So
yeah, the margins are decreasing, and the how to get value is a lot more based on distribution. So you need to get your own users, And that's why companies like Coinbase are making absolute bank on staking, and why smaller validators are not surviving, because one has distribution and has like the pricing power, and the other, like the smaller operators, don't have that. So yeah, it's although there's still more than enough to be made, there is this complicated time right now where some validators just haven't grown enough, and because the margins are not the same, they have to shut down, and that's a shame. I mean, it's problematic for decentralization and stuff like that, and that's why a lot of foundations, of course, focus on having a lot of people with a lot of contributions online. But yeah, it's interesting to see. Like, I don't think people always thought sort of, oh, there will be new chains and it's a given that I get some money from them, but that really is no longer the case, which is good in my opinion. It's a maturity of the market, but it's sad to see some of our friends go, because that's really
Exactly.
Past week I saw a few of our very technical, very good friends leave the ecosystem completely.
Oh, really? That's a bum.
Yeah, just how it goes. Like we said in the beginning, you have to. Marketing is maybe more important than anything else.
Looking ahead in the next 2 to 3 years, how do you envision the validator landscape evolving? I mean, are we gonna see some changes like in infrastructure, governance, or the incentive structures, or?
Yeah, if people ask me about the future of validation, there's two things that immediately come to mind, and then there's other things. The two things that immediately come to mind is, one is ZK and like validating, or sort of third-party validating, or like as a whole. Which the best way to explain this is, there's this person I spoke to once. He's called Timu. It's the founder of Gavulot and Equilibrium. They're this ZK team. They've built like their provers for Aztec and Aleo, and they've contributed to like tons of different ZK items. He said in a call I had with him that in the future there is no reason to ever redo computation. There's no reason to ever do computation more than once, which basically means validation is dead. And why he thinks that is because consensus is always, you can always verify consensus. You can simply ZK it and like send back the proof, and that's it, right? So you only need provers. You only need to sort of mine this like aspect.
So basically, proof of work is coming back.
Yes, exactly. So the future in that world is everything becomes proof of work again. And that's a very interesting take. And to an extent, that's playing out, right? Like prover ecosystems have grown a lot. There's more and more L2s that do like proving style, but it hasn't really moved to the L1s yet. But in theory, an L1 could just be settlement, and it doesn't have to do any consensus. I think there's many reasons as to why this isn't the case yet, but I think it's an interesting future perspective. And then two is everything will be an L2. And I thought this was the case a year ago, or not really, but like I thought there was like this existential crisis for validators and for our business, that there wouldn't be no new L1s and everything will be an L2. And then I've seen how many L1s launched over the past year, and I realized, no, this is not like valid. So I'm not super afraid of that thesis anymore. I think there will always be something to do for operators, because there's many different things that require sort of decentralized operation, whether it be oracles or the settlement layers on which all of these L2s thrive. And then in general, there's just this whole app chain thesis, or like the app chain growth cycle, which I think is it's best reflected by John. I can't pronounce his last name, but it's this guy on Twitter. He has like the Dino Bat Kit. He's an investor in Stride, John Chabanu or something. He has his own fund, and he has this image which is like you are an app, then you become an app chain, and then your app chain gets so much traction that you become a standard chain, like where everybody can deploy apps. And then on that standard chain, there is an app that becomes so successful that wants to be its own chain, that launches its own chain. And then that app chain at some point become so successful that it will be a generalized chain, and then that generalized chain will have an app, and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, like the IDX, right?
Yeah, DYDX or Hyperliquid, I think, is an awesome example as well, right? Where Hyperliquid like spun up their own chain, and now they have added the EVM, and after the EVM comes, there will be some apps on Hyperliquid which will probably be super successful, and then they will copy the Hyperliquid consensus and so forth. And Initia also really sees this, right? Like Initia is like a sort of setup for your own chain, but at some point you might want to mature to not be an L2 but be an L1 yourself. There's many aspects there. So reflecting on that thesis and like seeing that play out this year again, right? Like there's been more and more apps that become chains. If you look at Unichain, like validation is not going anywhere. So the future is, in my opinion, bright enough. It's just as a validator, you have to be very conscious about what you do with your margins, what you do with your distribution, what kinds of things you do. It's not.
And you have to adapt every time. Yeah. I think that's.
And I don't think it's a valid thesis to just say, "Hey, we'll do every chain, we'll get a foundation delegation, and we'll survive." Like that's just not enough. That's not enough money to keep you alive, and it's not innovative enough. So you have to be very technical and adapt and be well on that side, so your stakers can trust you and you can build a brand on like the security aspect, and you can help the chains. But you also need to grow your distribution. Think about what chains can I support, what chains can I not support, how do I grow that, and what other services can I deliver to such an extent that, yeah, I'm as accessible as possible without underpricing yourself. Like it's super easy as a validator to just say, oh, I want more TVL, like I drop my commission to 0, or I talk to some investor and I give them 0 commission or 1% commission. But if everybody does that, then there's nothing left, you know, like it's so commoditized that at a certain point you have to, maybe it's better to have less TVL, but like actually be able to charge your customers because they enjoy staking with you, instead of saying, oh, I'm a $5 billion business, but everybody that stakes with me is just with me because I charge the lowest. Like, and as soon as you change that, then nothing is left. So yeah, it's I think it's a very interesting business world to operate in. You meet so many great teams. You can have talks with CTOs and founders at the early stages of when they're joining, and you can help them out and like truly help them out while also being honest about what you can provide.
You are part of the journey with them, right?
Yeah. And on some chains, a lot more than others, right? Like if you are already a really large chain and you only start your validation after you've already done like a massive raise, then how you operate with validators is different than when you are a super small network that gets operators in first. And both approaches are valid. But yeah, I've really enjoyed steering networks to an extent to make different choices, to change their design. And that's been a great experience.
And what's been the most surprising or rewarding moment in your journey as a validator?
I think for us last year was working with Aleo. Was really it's just all around like incredibly positive. Not just because we are now a validator there, but because of the connections we've made, what we've learned. We were able to really contribute to their design and how they view validation, and I think they still have a long way to grow to change some of the things they've implemented so far. Like they're definitely in sort of pre-mainnet, at least on the validator side. But yeah, that's been a super rewarding experience. And then together with that, we started like our own sort of mini fund. So we started investing and advising some protocols in Cosmos where we feel like we add some value. So we're like investors in Union and some of their sub apps, and in Euclid.
Very bullish on Union here too. So
yeah, so that's been super rewarding and just really nice to do. Like I don't think we're special necessarily, but like we have a nice voice and a different type of brand, and always helpful to have a few calls with people and like try and help them out, develop some tools. Yeah, and now and lastly, I think there's a lot more things, I guess, for next year, which I'm hyped about, which is like the BeeBribes launch, which I put more in 2025 than in 2024, but that's been a good start as well. But the other thing that we had recently, which was really rewarding, was launching our first, or like being the sort of main partner in launching a network. So Zion recently launched, and we've done all of the RPC work for them, and then some of the other items as well on their infrastructure list. So being more involved besides just validation on like the infrastructure side,
That's key.
and developing like an entire framework for that people can get our RPCs. There's now like a form on our website where people can just go get an API key and get started using that on 60 plus chains, but also doing this on a incredibly high scale where there were 350,000 wallets that were claiming an airdrop, and all of them went through at least, like, there was some issues with the claiming, but at least there was no issues with the infrastructure we had put behind it. So that was really nice, like to be able to have our sort of first launch moment as well and be like in the war room and have that moment was exciting.
How big is the team right now?
So currently we're with 5 people. We just onboarded one more person who's helping on the BD and growth side, and then we work with some contractors sometimes, just like for a month or 2 here and there to like help on our website or something.
It's incredible how many things you do with only 5 people.
Yeah, until 3 months ago we were only with the 3 of us. So Dylan, James, and I. And then we took on an intern for the DevOps side, and she's been learning super fast from James. So she's just working together with him now on all of the system engineering side. So she onboarded full time. And then, we have one other person that just started 1st of December. So it's been 15 days.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, you need to stay. Being lean is helpful, man. Like the lines are short. We don't really have to have too many internal calls. We just message each other on Discord. Everybody works, to be honest, way too many hours, but it's enjoyable nonetheless.
Yeah. We are entering the last chapter of the podcast, and we want to wrap things up with some rapid fire questions to get a sense of where your head's at when it comes to crypto. But for this one, just quick top of mind answers. What's the most underrated and overrated idea in crypto right now?
Overrated, restaking. Underrated. DeFi still.
Favorite chains to validate for and why?
Oh, do I have to play favoritism for the many chains we have? Privacy networks.
Networks.
It's incredible to that difference with public chains just stagnating. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Top 3 most used crypto apps?
Shade Protocol, Margent, or at least I used to really use it a lot, and Restake, maybe just simple staking.
What's a crypto related topic you've completely changed your mind in the past year?
The proving side. Like I used to think L2s and ZK L2s were funky and strange, but I definitely grown accustomed to what they do, and it's clear to me why there is a future where many networks are just validiums to an extent. Yeah.
What problem in crypto do you think most urgently needs solving?
Interoperability.
What's one lesson from the bear market that stuck with you?
Sorry, can you repeat?
What's one lesson from the bear market that stuck with you?
Leave in May.
Your top advice for new validators entering the space?
Build a very differentiated service or product suite and focus on just a few networks that you think really align with your vision and brand for what crypto should be.
Thank you for this, Ertemann. Thank you for hopping in. I'm really excited to see how everything works out with BeeBribes and the validator business and everything. I think this was a blast. So, thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for hosting me. Yeah, it's been just great to meet you at most of the conferences and to just hop around. Like, there's I think this small crew with a few of us that just enjoy talking about crypto more deeply and like are quite involved. Validation can be very technical and set aside, but there's just a few validators that I know that are really into the weeds and like understand all the apps and like actually interface with the ecosystems they validate for. So yeah, I really appreciate that about you guys, and we try to do the same. I don't think we're yet as close, but it's really nice to see. Like, it's clear that you understand all the stuff you do. So
Thanks, man.
if you don't see us on a chain and can't stake with Lavender.Five, then definitely make sure to stake with BlockHunters.
That's a good one, brother. Thanks.
Thanks.